On December 22nd, 2020, the SEC filed its complaint against Ripple. And I sat down and I read it on Christmas Eve, December 24th. And after I read that complaint and read how broad it was and how it could be applied to every crypto asset, I began writing the writ of mandamus, which I filed 6 days after the SEC's complaint on January 1st, 2021, asking the SEC to only limit their claims against Ripple and the way Ripple sells XRP. And that's why I said the biggest misconception out there is that the SEC is only claiming that the way Ripple sells XRP, that it's a security. And that is simply not true. Because after my writ of mandamus, where I was saying, listen, you should only be going after Ripple and the way Ripple sells it, the SEC filed its first amended complaint on February 19th, 2021. It is document 46 that is filed in the Southern District, New York case docket. And let's review what the SEC says, not what John Deaton says, but let's review what the SEC says and why this is the most dangerous SEC enforcement action that I've personally ever read. But before we do that, for all the people out there who are against Ripple or against XRP, the Bitcoin maximalists out there or the Ethereum maximalists, I want to refer you to a 2015 video by Joseph Grunfest, a former SEC commissioner, and listen to what he said about Bitcoin in 2015 and whether or not the SEC believed Bitcoin was a security in and of itself.
So guys, in our previous videos, we talked about Coinbase's rebuttal of the SEC's claims that all of the crypto assets listed on the platform are securities, not just XRP. While this comes as a huge blow to the largest crypto trading platform in the US, it serves as a relief note to Ripple and XRP enthusiasts and everyone advocating for cryptocurrencies, especially those based out of the US. And why do I say everyone? Because these events and happenings are somewhat pegged to the US dollar. Should the US decide to revoke the access of its citizens to every cryptocurrency out there, rest assured there would be a big tumult in the entire financial space, given that the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. This time, once again, Ripple is making waves and registering itself on the world map, not just as the world bridge currency, but as the currency that could be used as the benchmark for regulating cryptocurrencies, especially in the United States. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on bell notifications before we move on.
Thinking about Bitcoin when they came up with the definition of the term security, but there she is. That's the definition. You're going to have to learn to work with that. You can't make Bitcoin go away. How are we going to have these two regimes communicate? Sometimes Bitcoin can be a security, and sometimes it won't be a security. You haven't had any court, you haven't had the SEC take a position with regard to whether Bitcoin itself is a security or not. We know that if you have a partnership and the partnership buys Bitcoin, then that partnership can be exactly like a partnership that buys a horse. And in that situation, your interest in the partnership that owns the Bitcoin, that's a security. That's not complicated at all. But the more interesting question that the courts and the SEC haven't yet looked at is the challenge of whether the Bitcoin itself is a security. And there, the answer, I think, is a resounding sometimes. Now, I think the SEC hasn't taken a position on it yet because it doesn't have to. All of the problems that the SEC has run into up until this point, they've been able to handle all of those issues within the four corners of existing precedent. Nothing has forced the SEC carefully and aggressively to examine the more difficult question of whether and when Bitcoin is a security. To determine whether Bitcoin is or isn't a security, you apply what lawyers call the investment contract test. Is there an investment of money? Is there an expectation of profit? Is there something that's called commonality? And are you relying on the efforts of others? Well, when you use Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee on campus here at Coupa Cafe, there's no expectation of profit. You know, you're not relying on the efforts of others for any of your return. There's nothing that the lawyers call commonality. So when you use Bitcoin for a cup of coffee, that's not a securities transaction, and that's not a security. So the securities laws would have nothing to do with that. On the other hand, suppose you go on the internet and you buy $200,000 of Bitcoin and you stick it in your electronic wallet and you're going to hold it there for 4 or 5 years thinking that Bitcoin will double or triple. Well, under those circumstances, it's very easy to describe that transaction as involving the purchase and sale of a security. You've got investment of money. You've got an expectation of profit. You're relying on the efforts of others. The others here are the miners that, in effect, have to operate the Bitcoin system in order to validate every transaction. We know that we can package interests in Bitcoin so that those interests are securities. That's easy. But the interesting question is, and the law hasn't gotten here yet, is Bitcoin itself a security? I think Bitcoin's future in the United States is potentially quite different than it is outside the United States.
That was the 2015 interview on former SEC chair and the William A. Frank Professor of Law and Business at Stanford Law School, Joseph Grunfest, attorney John Deaton was talking about in the previous video. Now, a brief history of who Mr. Grunfest actually is, according to this documentation on the SEC's official website. Professor Grunfest is founder and director of Directors College at Stanford Law School and principal investigator for Stanford Law School's Securities Litigation Clearinghouse. He served on the New York Stock Exchange's Legal Advisory Board, on the NASDAQ Legal Advisory Committee, on a Rules Committee of the United States District Court for the Northern District of California, and has been elected to membership in the American Law Institute. So, moving on, let's take a look at some other SEC commissioners. Here's another one from the current SEC chair Gary Gensler, reigning dozens of accolades on XRP during his days at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission back in 2014.
But to go between Tanzania and Nigeria, you need somebody to bear some counterparty risk that the ledgers both move and are adjusted at the same time. And usually it's a bank that is in both countries. You could use blockchain, but the current thinking is you need a bridge currency in between, and that bridge could be a stable value that's backed by the US dollar or the euro. It could be a currency even like Ripple has an alternative. It's just piloted in May, so it's not yet up in any enterprise-wide level.
And yet another from his days as a professor on blockchain technology at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Sloan School of Management, while confirming that Ethereum is indeed a security as it does conform to the same test for investment contract hinted at by Mr. Grunfest. Check this out, guys.
There was a gentleman in Florida that put up citrus groves and started to sell them, and the Supreme Court had to decide what is an investment contract, because an investment contract is a security. This four-part test, in my mind, suggests that most, maybe not all, but most initial coin offerings are securities, because they're investment contracts where there is an exchange of money, there's a common enterprise, you're relying on somebody else's expertise for profits. This is why I've earlier this year said I think that most of them are. I think Ether, when it was done in 2014, would pass this test. When I say pass, it means it's a security. Now, subsequently, the SEC has said by 2018 it's decentralized enough.
However, a few weeks into office as the chairman of the SEC, Gary Gensler launched a fierce campaign against Ripple, maintaining the already initiated lawsuit claims by his predecessor, Jake Layton, that XRP was indeed a security. Hence, Ripple did commit a crime by engaging in the sale of unregistered securities.
Hugo was asked about the token XRP and whether I think it's a non-compliant security. I've spoken publicly. Yes, I do think it's a non-compliant security. But this will not be resolved just by the Securities and Exchange Commission. It will be resolved by some courts, whether it's appellate courts or the Supreme Court. So what I believe is just that. It's a belief. But why would I say that? I think back to the Howey test. I think they are exchanging XRP. Ripple, the company, is exchanging XRP for something of value. And they're using it right now. They sell it every month. It's in a lockup. There's in an escrow, and they sell XRP every month. Ripple, the company.
Doesn't it sound all too sketchy? I mean, having these past and present high-ranking SEC officials outright affirming at different timelines, different conflicting ideas about XRP. It feels strange to me to have these staffers from the same agency affirming many different things about the same digital asset. Now, fast forward to a few years after Joseph Grunfest's analysis on how the SEC's Howey test doesn't suffice to regulate Bitcoin, hence XRP, Ethereum, or any other cryptocurrency out there. The SEC under Jay Clayton, then under Gary Gensler, have called XRP a security. Take a look at this.
Now, the crypto asset class, this new technology, it's new to all of us, even folks in the government side of things, regulators and so forth, and the folks at the SEC. Certainly, they have a job to do to protect retail investors from fraud. And there's been scams. I've seen some of them. But we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are many people who believe the SEC is not doing a great job, as is right now, under Gary Gensler. What are your thoughts on how the SEC is handling this, and what could they be doing better?
Well, let's begin with sympathy for the SEC. The SEC is charged with enforcing laws that were written in the 1930s. Tony, how many members of Congress were thinking about Bitcoin in 1933 or 1934 when they wrote the federal securities laws? Give me the name of every member of Congress who said, this is how we're going to handle Bitcoin under the federal securities laws. See? Nobody thought about this. So what we have is a regulatory regime that is designed not to be able to deal with this problem. And then we tell the SEC, you got to deal with this problem. Right? Why? Because, well, there's a perfectly reasonable interpretation of the federal securities laws that says a piece of what's going on in crypto is a security and should be regulated by the SEC. There's no doubt about that. But the question is, which piece? And how do you regulate it? And how do you wind up regulating it without killing it? Which goes back to my point about compliant crypto. All right? To take a step back and say, well, the problem is all the SECs, that's not fair. That's not right. Okay? And by the same token, to take a step back and say, well, the SEC has been handling this perfectly. That's not fair, and that's not right either. I think the more appropriate approach is to stand back and say, you know, this situation is a mess. Congress never planned for it. And now we've given the SEC and other agencies, it's not just the SEC, it's a problem for the CFTC, the banking regulators. It's a problem for the whole regulatory structure. We don't have statutes that are designed to address the challenges presented by crypto. And we're asking all of our regulatory agencies to deal with that challenge without giving them the appropriate congressional level instructions and tools. So why are we surprised the situation's a mess? Of course it's a mess.
I agree with you there that, and I've heard Chair Gensler talk about this, and I give him credit for that he said it even before members of Congress, that these are the rules and regulations I'm operating with. It is what it is. But I think folks are a bit taken back with how heavy-handed he's coming down on this, given that he understands the dynamic. He was teaching about crypto at MIT. And, you know, obviously we're not in his head and we don't know what he's thinking. But I think folks are just taken back. Wow, this is aggressive. Even Chair Chair Clayton was not this aggressive. So what's going on here? Are there other motives? And there's been...
Well, you know what's really interesting over here? I can tell the story that it's being really aggressive, and I can tell the story that it's being unbelievably...
Of course, there are definitely some other hidden agendas to this, ideas behind the scenes regarding the XRP lawsuit. Too bad we couldn't see it back in the day. But through these recent occurrences, we could see clearly how this was all pre-planned. From the famous 2018 speech by the then Director of Corporation Finance at the SEC during Jake Layton's regime as the SEC Chair, William Hinman, to Gary Gensler's many inconsistent assertions regarding XRP, and now to the U.S. Congressman Brad Sherman's ill-conceived and misinformed assertions, we see that these individuals all have a relationship with one unique entity through the former SEC Chair, Jake Layton. What does that tell you? Well, it points to one simple fact. And now, even though Coinbase has blatantly denied these SEC assertions this time, leaving room for speculators in the assets and spectators alike to assume that the crypto exchange is being this way because it involves Ethereum, which makes it even more guilty of the same crimes of unfairness and partiality, just like the SEC. More interestingly, rumor has it that this trend is only one of many to come, as that is a trend that the SEC has been seen to be engaged in over the last couple of days. And it seems like the SEC is about to issue a series of court orders against these other exchanges for selling security assets, making profits from investors who are looking to get their hands on these coins. At which point, neither of these altcoins, either ADA, Solana, you name it, not even Bitcoin, none of them would be spared.
Words for it. Let's look at the complaint and let's look at the very first sentence of the very first paragraph. And you can see the way they classify the token itself. From at least 2013 through the present, defendants sold over 14.6 billion units of a digital asset security, XRP. A digital asset security. Okay, so they're claiming that XRP itself, the token, is a security. You could say digital asset security, Bitcoin, digital asset security, Ethereum, digital asset security, XLM, and on and on and on.
Tend, as the SEC, to talk about the token itself as being a security. And that's really a shorthand, because what the question really is so like a stock or a bond is a security, but a securities offering can include an investment contract, which is what Howie's all about. And so it's not that the thing itself, the Howie case, for example, was about orange groves. It's not that the orange groves themselves or the orange trees or the oranges were a security. What we were saying is the way that you sold those pieces of the orange grove, it was a securities offering because it was an investment of money. You were looking for profits based solely on the efforts of someone else. That's what a securities offering is all about. And so instead, what we've done now is we've started to say, well, the orange groves are kind of like the security. And so if you sell a piece of an orange grove as in a securities offering, then it continues to be a security, the orange grove piece itself. I think it's better if we really look at the offering as a whole and we don't try to treat the tokens as securities. And so that's where I start to think we need to take a step back and stop thinking about the token as a security itself.
When that happens, what do you think happens to XRP? Where do you think that would leave XRP? Guys, I know this might come as a surprise, and I'm sure you won't believe your eyes when that happens, but believe it or not, XRP is going to replace the Howey test and become the benchmark for regulating these other cryptos after all is said and done.